Today we have Chris Welch, who is a builder and knows a ton about development. He's had over 30 years of experience. He has a construction management degree. He's done single family, multifamily, townhomes. It just never ends. So this guy has a ton of experience in building, especially in Seattle where there's constantly things being changed. Seems like every single day. It's hard to keep up on things, so I know a lot of people have questions. And hopefully Chris will help answer some of those today. But without further ado, Chris Welch.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you for having me here, you guys. Thank you, Michael. And hope everybody's having a good evening and will enjoy what I have to share with you. I'm going to try to tell you a little bit about building wealth in the backyard, and ADUs, new construction, and how it's a good time to be doing this. But first of all, I'll just expand a little bit on my background so you guys kind of know where I'm coming from. Been in the construction world since I was young, just kind of got bit by the construction bug, and it's been in me my whole life. So I've got hands-on experience actually building, and went and got a degree in construction management. Kind of worked my way through that, doing several trades, so I got to really live and breathe kind of how things are built. Got my degree, came out of construction management out of California State University in Chico, came up to Seattle here and worked with Howard S. Wright. Maybe you might have heard of them, big Seattle builder. Did some big multifamily stuff, apartments. Moved on to a developer in Bellevue called Continental Bental, and did about 700 units with them. Ended with a high-rise downtown Seattle, and then decided I was ready to move on and start my own company and go back and kind of get into the residential world. So scale it back. I didn't enjoy that big commercial feeling and world. It was not personal enough, so I got into the residential world. I've been doing residential single family under my own company since 2000. I do a lot of development, townhouses, ADUs, DADUs. We do some single family custom homes. I build for sale, I build to keep, I have lots of rentals. So I have touched a lot of things in real estate, but I've been focusing on Seattle for the better part of about 14 years. So I'm going to focus on Seattle, which is a lot of where you guys are doing your projects, and hopefully share a lot about the new codes and zoning and things, and why it is a good time to be building here, and specifically right in your backyard. So we're going to talk about the right property starts with the right zone. And so zoning is kind of the rules of the game, right? It's kind of telling you what we have to play by. So when you're looking for your properties, make sure you understand a little bit about zoning. Make sure you know what areas of the city that you want to be in and what zone you might want to build in. The advantages right now are in the neighborhood residential zone. So it's telling you things like what's allowed, whether it's industrial, commercial, residential, what type of construction can go in that area, and then also what happens, the activities that can be there. So you want to also know in certain areas you can have commercial, you could warehouses, office buildings, commercial, single family. That's all going to be determined by the zoning. So understand that a little bit, know where you want to go, and know that each jurisdiction controls it. It's not universal across all jurisdictions. Once you leave Seattle and go to a different jurisdiction, you're going to have to know that you're playing by a whole different set of rules, and so you need to learn that zoning and make sure it's going to work for what you want to do, okay? So the NR zone, as I mentioned, that's kind of the neighborhood residential. We used to have NR 1, 2, and 3. It's basically now just neighborhood residential NR zoning. And a lot of things have changed in the last year and a half. You may have heard about the House bills for the state that have been passed, middle housing terms, cottages, all that stuff. Everything that those are talking about is essentially it's a movement to try and get more density and get more housing with the existing lots and existing land that we have, right? So what Seattle's done to try and accommodate and meet those requirements, those House bills from the state basically put a requirement on all the jurisdictions based on their population that said you have to meet these certain criteria. You have to allow this many homes on each lot based on your population, and those jurisdictions had a certain amount of time to come up with the new zoning laws to be able to meet those rules. And Seattle was kind of ahead of the game a little bit because it was already a highly dense area. They're already trying to get more density with ADUs and things like that. But they have made it even better for us as builders, developers, and entrepreneurs here that are trying to build and bring more units. The height limit has gone up to 32 feet, the 50% lot coverage. There is a required amenity area. I put that on there just as a note to make sure. A lot of people forget about that. So there's required amenity space that you also have to factor into your site plans. And then they've also uniformly made the base lot size 5,000 square feet, whereas before there was, in those NR 1, 2, and 3s, there was different base lot sizes. In some zones you had to have a minimum of 7,500 square feet, for example. Now the base lot size is 5,000, which does help if you are going to get into subdividing and things like that. FAR, they went ahead and increased the FAR, which is floor area ratio. So we're getting a 0.6 to up to a 2.0 multiplier, which is that's a multiplier based on the square footage of your lot, okay? So for simple math, if you have a 5,000 square foot lot and you're getting up to 2 square feet per lot, you're able to put 10,000 square feet of new construction on that property, all right? Now to get all the way to 2, you have to do some things. You have to get extra bonuses and stuff to get that high, but we don't need to get that high. We're dealing with floor area ratios on average of like 1.1, 1.0, 1.2, and there's an easy factor on how many units you're putting on the lot. That determines what you're getting for your floor area ratio. The more units you put on a lot, the higher your floor area ratio is. That's another way they're incentivizing to get more units. So if you're willing to put more units on your lot, they're going to give you more square footage, okay? So that's one of the things that they've done to also incentivize. The base density of 1 unit per 1,250 square feet and higher if you do some other incentive things. If you're, there's also some bonuses if you're within certain distances of transit areas, major transit stops, bus lines, things like that will qualify, and you get some incentive and bonuses to be able to do more density. But just jumping to the 1 per 1,250, that was a game changer for Seattle. Now, again, back to that 5,000 square foot base lot, divided by 1,250, we can put 4 units on a simple 5,000 square foot lot, right? 50 feet wide, 100 feet deep, 5,000 feet, we can now put 4 houses on it, all right? Whereas before we couldn't. You know, we could do an ADU and it was limited in size and there was a bunch of restrictions. Now this is opening things up for us and making it a lot easier to get multiple units on these small sites. They've also reduced the parking in most cases. Now you don't have to do as much parking. 1 parking stall for every 2 primary residential units and no stalls required in certain transit areas, okay? So that was also a big deal. When you have to start putting parking on site, you eat up the property really fast. And if you don't have an alley, then you have maneuvering issues and that takes up additional square footage on the site that makes it more difficult to get additional units. So that's another thing that has made a big difference for us. And then we talk about accessory dwelling units. So some of the things that they've changed and made ADUs, accessory dwelling units, they're allowing 2 of these ADUs per lot, right? And they're in all residential zones you can do this, right? So now we can take, if we have 1 primary unit on the property, we can do 2 accessory dwelling units. They're accessory to the main house, right? The ADUs do not require any off-street parking. Now, a lot of times, depending on the area, you might still want to provide parking, so keep that in mind. Just because you don't have to, you got to also be smart enough to look at the demographic, what the neighborhood is. Maybe you're not going to get the ARV that you want if you don't have parking. So keep that in mind. You don't always want to build these without parking. The maximum 1,000 square feet is still in effect, but we can get 1,200 square feet now as long as we do 3 bedrooms. That was also part of this new update. So we get an additional square footage. We were having difficulty making 3-bedroom units with only 1,000 square feet. It's just hard. It's hard to make them live right and make the bedrooms big enough and all that stuff, get all your hallways and stairways and all the stuff that you want in a 3-bedroom house. It was really hard to get in 1,000 square feet. So now that they've bumped this up to 1,200, that has really been another game changer for us. It's really sparked a lot of ADUs, DADUs, detached ADUs now. We can get a pretty comfortable 3-bedroom house now with just the 1,200 square feet. You also get up to 250 square feet of the garage that is exempt from that 1,000 or 1,200. You don't have to calculate that into your square footage. So that's great. If you can get a garage on there and 1,200 square feet, it's really been widely accepted in Seattle. These things are selling really, really well. Below grade square footage is exempt from the calculation. So if you do have a site that maybe has a slope to it or something, and you're able to maybe dig or have to because of the slope, usually the slopes are negative, but in this case, sometimes if you can dig some of your foundation and first floor into the grade, there's a calculation that you can run. If it's a certain amount below grade, you don't have to count that square footage into your floor area ratio. So you could actually have more than 1,200 square foot of house by burying some of it in the ground and excluding that from your calculation. So find the right property. I'm just kind of pointing out the ideal property. This ideal property doesn't exist a lot, let's be honest, right? But I'm just going to throw it out there. If you can get a few of these items, that's great. If you could get them all, that's wonderful. You want to be in the best neighborhood, right? I put that at the top for a reason. Location, location, location. Everybody knows that. So don't forget about it. It's a big deal, right? You can have a great project in the worst neighborhood and it will not pencil. It will not make you money. It'll be horrible, even though the house and the product is great. If it's not in a good neighborhood with the right ARV that people want to live, it's not going to work. Okay? Simple. So find the best neighborhoods. If you can find one like this one in the picture, the house is nicely situated towards the front, we get a large backyard, okay? If the existing home is turnkey, if it's in good shape, right? If it's in livable condition, that's ideal. Again, we don't always get what we want, but this is what we'd like. If you have an alley in the backyard or a corner lot, then you get access to parking much easier. You can park from the alley side. You might be able to park from the side street if you have a corner lot. If you're stuck in the middle of a block and you don't have an alley, I'm not saying they don't work, it's just more challenging. If you need driveway access, it really takes up space and it's hard to get the middle block units without an alley. Those ones are a little bit tougher to do, okay? No ECAs. We do not like environmentally critical areas. If we can stay away from wetlands and steep slopes and liquefaction and all the environmentally critical areas, if we can stay away from those, we do. And that's kind of one of the biggest ones on the list to stay away from, in my opinion, you guys. Believe me, I've done them. I've gutted it out through the process of biologists and engineers and consultants and getting through wetlands and buffers and steep slopes. And I've done pretty much all of these and we get them to work usually, but it takes so much more time. It's beating your head against the wall. It's adding cost. It's adding time. If you can avoid them, okay? All utilities available, including water, sewer, power, and storm. We don't want to buy property without all of those. We need them, right? We're not going to be able to build it without them. So make sure those are available. If they're not available, what's it going to take to get them there, right? Sometimes we might have to concede a little bit and maybe do an extension or something. But make sure that you're looking at those. Those are very, very critical. Number one thing you want to look at as well. Street frontage and alley are improved. If we can, again, on this ideal property, if we have nice curb and gutter and sidewalk and a planter strip and street trees, and that's already in, that's what we want. This is the ideal property, you guys. And if it doesn't have those things, just make sure that you've got it in your budget, or make sure you're buying the property right so that you can put them in if they're going to be required, all right? Again, the ideal property, you're not going to get all of those items, most likely. If you do find a property with all those items, please call me, okay? I will take it. So now you found the ideal property. Let's acquire it, let's plan it, and let's build it, right? So I put this one up here just because mostly people love to say, well, how long is it gonna take, and what does it take, and what are the processes? So this is more of just kind of showing kind of behind the scenes. This is how we schedule in a bigger, higher view of things. Feasibility study, there's many things that go in there, so it's not broken down in detail, but your feasibility study, that's in your acquisition process. You want to run that feasibility, make sure you check for all those utilities and those ECAs and all that stuff. Run your budgets, your ARVs, get your comps figured out for the site. Make sure you do a thorough job of that feasibility, because once you acquire it, you're stuck with it. Okay, and believe me, I've been stuck with one or two bad ones that I wish I would have done a better feasibility on. So after you acquire it, you've done your feasibility, you acquire it, let's get into architectural design, right? Find a good architect. Good architect is somebody that knows the jurisdiction well and will help you get through that jurisdiction quickly, because they've already done some work there. They already expect and know what the jurisdiction wants. They know the format of the drawings. They know some of the reviewers. They can ask questions. They can get responses because they have relationships, all right? It's valuable, even if they cost you a little more. I hear all the time people want to just find the cheapest architect, and it's just somebody used somebody, and it didn't matter where they came from or where they did. It could be from another state. And it's like, that's the wrong way to find architects and people that help you move your project along quickly. And time is money in this world, you guys. You want to move these things along quickly. You want to get your permits fast. Architectural design, you'll have a certain amount of phase where you'll be designing that. Make sure you like the floor plates, the design, the layout, the way the appearance is, and then it'll go into structural design. The architect will send that to your structural engineer. They will do the structural design process. The architect will integrate that into their plans, and then they'll send it in and submit it for permitting. So this is a sample project. It was actually a real project that I took these dates from. So these aren't made up. It doesn't mean that they're perfect. It doesn't mean that it can even happen again. It's just a sample of a project that this is what happened. So you can see here from October 24th through February 5th, that whole time frame we were working back and forth. There might have been a couple of correction cycles with the city. So plan for that. You're going to submit your plan in. They're going to review it. Multiple reviewers. Could be 5 reviewers, could be 10 reviewers, depending on what site it is and what kind of issues are on the site. Depends on how many people are going to have to review your project. They're going to send corrections back, and believe me, they will find some. Your architect, if they're good, is going to respond fast for you. They're going to address them quickly. Also, if you have good structural engineers and good consultants on the besides your architect, they're going to also be quick. I've seen this bogged down simply waiting for people to respond. So that's another reason to have a good team of architects, engineers, and consultants. Get the permit issued, and then on February 7th, roughly, we started construction and built this ADU out between February 7th and June 19th, where we then had our final inspection. So you can see it's approximately a 10.5 month cycle. That's being pretty diligent and making sure that things are happening and moving. But that's kind of a real world, real life scenario of how you can build an ADU from acquisition to final completion in about 10.5. I generally say to people, you can do it in a year. And from buying a piece of property to doing the whole entire process and having it built, if you can do it in a year, that's a decent time frame, okay? On this one, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one. This one is just really a blown up, more detailed breakdown of what the construction cycle looks like. Okay, so that previous bar, when we started on February 7th to finishing on June 19th, this kind of gives you a little bit of detail on what is happening during that build cycle and what the order of trades are that's going through that process. So another reason I like to point this out is that you're going to be looking for a general contractor to build your project out, assuming that's what you want to do. If you can find a contractor, especially in this ADU world, we're building small contractors, small projects. A lot of them are not real organized. They're not as in depth as somebody like myself that's been through multifamily and high-rise construction. I've got a lot of processes and a lot of knowledge of running software, scheduling software, and things like that. This stuff is a no-brainer for me. If you can find a builder that has a detailed schedule, I believe that's a great sign in their organization, okay? Most of them that I come across, smaller construction contractors, they don't even have a schedule. They don't even have one at all, and I'm serious. They're looking at the job site, they're seeing what is done today, and they're calling what should be done next week, maybe the week after at best, but they have no clue what should be happening 6 weeks from now. And my team does. This is a consolidated schedule. I consolidated this to get it to fit on this screen. Our schedule has about 120 items on it, and we know what's happening from the very beginning, and we can adjust it as things come up during the build. We can make adjustments, we can see how it slides, we can notify people way out in advance. So when you're looking for your general contractor, I think it's a great question to ask them how they schedule the project, if they use any scheduling software, or if they could provide you a sample of their schedule, okay? Cost of ADUs. So time frame is one of the big ones. That's why I brought up the schedule. The next, sometimes it's time, sometimes it's cost, but the next biggest question is how much is this going to cost, right? So ADUs in the backyard are a little bit different than a full-blown single-family house. We're condensing things down. We're having a higher cost per square foot because of the smaller size. And the thing that makes that kind of easy to understand, for example, is this kitchen. This kitchen could be the kitchen in a 2,000 square foot townhouse, and it could also be the kitchen in a 1,000 square foot ADU. But the cost of it didn't change, you guys. So if I'm going to take the cost of that kitchen and divide it over 2,000 square feet, that's a much smaller number than if I take the same cost of that kitchen and I can only spread that cost over 1,000 square feet. So you hear people talking about cost per square foot all the time, right? The cost per square foot on a 2,000 square foot house is not the same as the cost per square foot on a 1,000 square foot ADU. It's simple math. It's not because the builder wants to make more money or because they are making more money. It's just simple math. You take one appliance. If you bought that oven for $1,000 and you divide it over 1,000 square feet, you spent $1 per square foot on that appliance. If you bought that same appliance on 2,000 square feet, you've spent 50 cents a square foot. That's how it works. Just keep that in mind. It's not the builder just trying to make more money. It's the cost of building a smaller project. Whether it's attached or detached can also impact it. The attachment we have to rework some of the existing house. So that makes things complicated sometimes. It's going to add cost. You probably have to rework, do some siding, some roofing, some fire rating, all of that kind of stuff when you attach. Attached ones are also bringing lower ARVs. People want to be detached. So if you are designing your own product, I would recommend you try to keep them detached if you have the space. Permits and impact fees, they really don't change a whole lot. Just because we made this ADU smaller than a regular house, we're still paying pretty much the same permits and impact fees. So again, cost per square foot, I'm paying the same high permits and I'm only applying it to a small building, right? Our utility connections, subcontract costs, the size and the scale. We're not, kind of the size and scale thing is, I'm not able to distribute my costs over multiple units or bigger properties, bigger projects. Like maybe if I'm doing 2 or 3 houses on a property or a subdivision or whatever, I can share some costs. The scale and the size of this project is big enough that I'm sharing like my supervision, my overhead, my day-to-day labor, my guy sweeping the floors, on a single ADU, he spends an hour and he's done. And then he's got to drive somewhere else. So the expense, I don't get to share that amongst others. So that's another reason why these ADUs on that price per square foot seem to be higher than they should. Utility connections, again, they don't get any easier just because the house is smaller. I still got to dig the trench. I still got to go down and get the sewer. I might have to bring underground power. I got to bring water in. That stuff costs the same amount whether it's big or small. My access in a backyard, this is one that we've kind of had to learn as we've been doing these ADUs. The first few, we kind of didn't factor in this issue as much as we should have. Getting to the backyard sometimes is a lot more difficult. A lot of times you have to come in from the front. Sometimes there's an alley, which is great. Then we have better access. We can come in from the alley. But accessibility is a factor. So if you're buying a property and you have really small side yard setbacks on an existing house and you can't get down the sides and you don't have an alley, you really need to kind of take a second look at that and say, can I even build an ADU back here efficiently? Can I even get an excavator back here? Can I get it down the side of the house? We've had those situations and we've had to really look at that. The specifications and the finishes, this should be a no-brainer, but picking the right specs and the right finishes that are to meet your budget, that's a big deal. We're not building high-end custom homes. These ADUs generally are for entry-level price point. It's kind of become the affordable house in Seattle, right? This is the introductory level of house. It's getting a new house in Seattle to a price point that people can kind of afford. So keep that in mind when you're picking out your specs and your finishes. You don't want to be overly extravagant here and waste a bunch of money on finishes and specs when you don't need to. Energy efficiency and green build. This one is somewhat subjective, but it's becoming, I want to talk about a little bit just because Washington State has one of the highest or most stringent energy codes in the country. And you can be proud of that on one level, but you can also be frustrated about it on another level, okay? That high efficiency, that high demand of our energy code makes these things become a little more expensive. One of the recent changes in the standard, what we call prescriptive path of building, on the energy code is requiring rigid insulation on the outside of the building. You guys might have seen this in some of the newer builds now. And what is that, sometimes it's yellow or pink or white, or, like what is that going on the side of the house before the siding goes on? Well, they're putting up insulation on a foam rigid board on the outside of the house. And that's written into the new energy code as the prescriptive path. Now, the prescriptive path means I can just follow this list that was already written up and approved, and I can just build it that way and it will meet energy code. There's ways around it. So again, back to your general contractor and your architect, if they know these things, they could show on your architectural plans that there's another way to do this. We can eliminate that rigid foam insulation and still meet the energy code by doing other things, and they don't cost as much. That putting that insulation on the exterior of just a DADU recently, we had quoted out when we were exploring this new code, and I believe it was going to cost about $8,000 to put this rigid 1-inch rigid board on the outside. And it's amazing after you dive in and work with people that understand and the architects that can run the calcs, it wasn't that hard to get rid of. You just need to show that the perimeter envelope of your building can still meet the energy code, and it's not that hard, okay? Just keep that in mind. The costs are going to be much higher on a per square foot basis for these than the others. So what are the real costs? Okay, this is where I'm diving down. These are the numbers, you guys. I'm being fully transparent here. This is a real job. This is real numbers. And I'm also showing you general contractors, organization, and detail. This is how we budget. There's CSI codes, there's standard coding system. The cost codes that you see there, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, those are standard construction codes. We specify everything by line item, so we know where everything is, we know what it's going to cost, we get things quoted, we have it itemized, and we know exactly what's going into the project. If you can find a general contractor that is very organized and gives you a bid with a level of detail that is half as much of that, I would say that's good, okay? But if you get a bid that says your DADU is $400,000 and that's all you get, you need to run, okay? You're gonna get in trouble. And where you get in trouble with these things, I hear all the time, they hire a contractor to build and there's no detail, there's no specification list, there's no reference back to what you actually build. You don't know what you're buying, you guys. Without a detail, without specifications, you literally don't know what you're buying. So you're giving that contractor carte blanche to come back to you during construction and say, you know what, you selected this cabinet and it's going to cost you $3,000 more than the cabinet I put in the budget. What is your response to that when you didn't know what was in the original budget to begin with? He's taking advantage of you if he wants to, or maybe things aren't going well on the job and he needs to make up for it. So he could arbitrarily at any time say to you on one of your selections, he could say, that selection is going to cost me more than the one I put in the budget. So if you had this level of detail or some version of it, and you said, the cabinets I picked in the budget, you had $11,935 for my cabinets. Show me what that one was. My specs say it's this brand and it's this type of finish, and that's what I picked. So it shouldn't cost any more. Or if I do pick something differently and I see that quote and that quote is $14,000 and I know that I had $11,900, I can do the math myself. I'm going to pay you this much more because I like that cabinet better. Okay? It simplifies things. It makes everybody accountable for what's happening. It takes away the argument, the emotion, all of that stuff if you have a certain level of detail in your contract and you know what you're buying, okay? So this is kind of what we're all hoping to get to by building wealth in the backyard. Again, I'm just being transparent here with some numbers. This is a real life summary. Again, this is, when I do a summary, this is before the job was built. Keep that in mind. So this is not, I'm not telling you this job happened. I'm telling you I made one up that where I expected to happen on a job, this is what I was expecting, okay? And I circled the cell in red for lot cost being 0 because that's where this backyard concept is the game changer, you guys. If you buy a property well enough, that ideal property, if you found that ideal property and it had a big backyard and that backyard was free, that's free. That's what free does for you guys. If you can get free dirt, then you can get to a bottom line to where maybe you are making $178,000 on a property just by doing one ADU in the backyard. I'm not saying you will, I'm not saying you won't. There's a lot of variables in there that can change the numbers. One of the biggest ones is the sales price, $750,000. I went into this project thinking, yeah, the comps and the real estate agent, everybody, we're expecting this thing to sell for $750,000. Well, remember, it takes about a year on a good day to get to the end where I can sell it. Well, what happens in that year? If you've noticed in this last year, numbers have fallen, right? So that $750,000 could easily turn into $700,000. And then you get a buyer that says, I'll pay you $690,000. So that's part of the game, you guys. That's part of the risk. That's part of being a developer, a builder. That's just part of it. So if you lose 50 and another 10, you lose 60 up. Now you're down to 118 or whatever, right? So that's real life for building and developing. You have to be okay with that. But you also have to be in the right neighborhoods and the right property to even find the ADU property neighborhoods where you can get $750,000. That's why that location comment was so important. Find the areas where you get a good ARV, okay? So that's a good property, that's a good project. I also want to point out, this is a for sale scenario. You can see, subtracting all the selling costs, $52,700 worth of selling costs. Imagine if you're wealth building and you're keeping properties for rent, you wipe that $52,000 off of there, you have equity now, $230,000 of equity in that property that now is sitting in your backyard. And you can put a renter in there, you can have that renter pay this property off for you over time. This property is going to double every 10 years roughly. This is how you guys can build your wealth with the backyard concept. And you don't need very many of these, you guys. You do a couple of these, and get them paid off and be patient, and you'll be surprised how quickly your wealth can build just by doing a few of these ADUs and finding them with a good property, that ideal property, hopefully. So condos and single family. This is a new thing that kind of everybody is like trying to figure out and understand what's going on. I don't know. The reason that you're seeing, and you probably have heard of condos in Seattle, the reason we're seeing condos in single family now is it's giving us an avenue to divide these up and separate them on the lot, okay? Everybody's probably heard of subdivision or short plat or short subdivision. That's a traditional method, dividing up a piece of property into multiple lots. Now we're dealing with these small little sites, and this is again a real example here of a site with a condo map now. So we take this small site, this one we happen to put 3 units on it. We had essentially a primary with an attached ADU and then a detached ADU in the back. And this allows us now to take that one small 5,000 square foot lot, put multiple units on it. We condo it, and it's faster than doing a subdivision. It gives us the legal lots that are required for lenders, because all of us, whether we're going to sell or keep, we need a lender most likely. that you're going to either refi the construction lender out or your own money maybe, and you're going to put a long-term loan on it, they're going to want a single parcel. And one way to do that is by giving them a condo. So a lender now I can get a lender on unit B, I can get another lender or the same lender on unit C. I could sell off unit A if I want, because now I've separated them all into 3 individual units by doing the condo process. There is an HOA required when you do this. The HOA is going to help facilitate how things are shared. There's usually going to be some shared walkways, a shared driveway, maybe shared trash area, those kinds of things, to where you're going to have a minimal HOA. And it's become more and more normal now. People are getting used to it, agents getting used to it. Appraisers had difficulty in the beginning, but now everybody's seeing this more and more common. So these things are not deal killers, even if you do decide that you want to go to market and sell. This condo process has become more and more normal, and it's not scaring off buyers. Insurance requirements on common walls. When you do have an attached one like this, I just want to point out this was kind of a new one that we learned as soon as we started doing this. Because there's a common wall there, essentially you're getting an insurance policy that's going to cover those 2 buildings because they share a wall, and the HOA can manage that through HOA dues. The HOA dues would be higher to units B and C because it would include their insurance on their structures, okay? You're going to need an attorney and a surveyor to do this. Surveyor is going to create this condo map for you. An attorney is going to help you with all the legal condo docs. So I'm going to try and wrap this up. These are really just kind of some pictures of some projects, kind of help put in real life. It's doing its own thing now. That was the six packer, we call it. Had a primary and ADU in the front. Had 2 of these ADUs in the back. Rooftop decks. We can still do rooftop decks on ADUs. We can make them feel nice and big and open with some amenities, and that's what's helping also sell these. People are loving it. It's not just like ADUs kind of had a negative connotation, I think, in the past, but now, we're really making these ADUs to be, nice livable units, right? There's pre-approved DADUs, and they're going through the process right now in City of Seattle specifically. They're taking new plans in now from architects, and they're reviewing them, and they're going to be improving these pre-approved DADUs. And so that might be an opportunity if you find the right lot. You could maybe use some of these, and hopefully they do get some better designs in. Pre-approved units, they're only going to fit and work on certain size lots, and to really take advantage of those savings, my opinion is it has to be a really flat, simple lot with the room that fits. Once you start modifying to accommodate anything and just touching that with the architect and the structural engineer and all that stuff, just start over. Just do a custom plan, is my opinion. That's what I have for you today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
If you're assuming you're putting in a new sewer hookup, I think the county has, and you want to hold it rather than sell it off. The county has some kind of fees that are like ongoing for the new sewage hookup. Do those?
Correct. Yeah, you have the sewer capacity charge. Yeah, so that can be amortized over time and included in your monthly sewer bill. So that's just part of the price of playing the game. Yep.
I know you do build to rent and then also build to sell. Chris, what are some key differences in the product that you find most effective on a rental project versus a flip?
Yeah, good question. For rent, we think of things like maintenance, durability. We don't, as landlords, we don't want to be out there fixing things all the time. We don't want things failing. We want good, reliable things. We also don't need the highest end expensive things. So we're doing LVP flooring You know, and traditionally it'd be hardwood, or even still on high-end homes, we're doing hardwood. And rentals, we're exclusively doing LVP, which is a luxury vinyl plank. It's very durable. It's almost indestructible. It's waterproof. That kind of stuff. Countertops are quartz all the time, very durable. They're pretty much been the norm now. Doors, people don't think a lot about doors, I think, as much as they should. Christy might laugh, but you know, she knows I like swing doors, right? So closets with bifold doors, they drive me crazy. You put a bifold door on a modern house, I don't understand it. The door's gonna come off the track, the renter's gonna be calling you and saying, you need to come out here and fix this door that's coming off the track. So think about some of the things like that, about usability. We even go as far as on our doors now, we're doing a pre-finished stained door that is solid core. We find that it's just a lot more durable than a hollow core door. Number one, it's not going to get a hole punched in it if it gets scratched or damaged to the point where it really needs any maintenance. Instead of having to deal with a door that has to be maybe sanded and bonded and primered and all these different processes, we simply could just buy a new slab, new door, already pre-finished in the same color that we had for the house from the supplier. It gets shipped to the house and we replace the door, and it's just done. Okay, it's just simplification and, you know, thinking about owning and maintaining that house. Now, if you're going to go for sale, you're thinking a little bit about what does the buyer want? What is maybe the trendy thing sometimes, you know? I'm not a trendy guy. I don't like the trends that come and go because of long-term stuff. But if you're going to go for price, it is a reality. People like to buy the newest and best thing. So go out there and see what is the new trendy thing. And you might have seen, like, you know, brass towel bars and plumbing fixtures and things. They've come back in some of the higher end homes. They want brass, you know, or brushed brass, you know, even down to how the finish and whether it's smooth or brushed. Black hardware, there's black hardware everywhere now, black plumbing and door hardware and all that stuff. So pay attention to some of those trendy things. And if you want the highest dollar per foot for your sale, do some of those trendy things. And don't do them all right? I've made that mistake too. Like, okay, I'm gonna do all these trendy things. Well, you blow your budget on all this stuff in the house and you didn't need it. You need a few little nice upgrades here and there to catch the eye and the attention, and what's gonna make the biggest bang for the buck, and do it in the right places, and that'll help you get the highest dollar you can if you're gonna sell.
Doesn't matter like which time of the year start the building process. Because for example, in winter, it rain a lot, it will affect the process of pouring concrete, right?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. And you know, in Seattle it rains, right? And concrete guys are working year round. We just deal with it. And in the extreme cases, we might have to wait a few days because of a heavy downpour or freezing. We can't pour when it's freezing. You know, we might need to pour a slab for a patio outside, then put up a tarp to keep the rain off of it. We just deal with it. So I'd say no, it doesn't affect it. The more important part, especially if you're gonna, well, sell or rent, this affects both. The more important part is, when are you gonna finish that home? Don't finish a home in November, please. Nobody's buying in November and December. You're just gonna sit on the house, and you're gonna sit on it when the rent or the interest rate is building up on you, because your loan is fully drawn and your interest is the highest it's gonna be, and you're gonna just pay that interest for a few months until people get out and start buying houses again, which is usually late January. February is probably even better. You wanna hit that market. There's some pent-up demand from the people that have stopped buying in November and December, and they went and handled their holidays and vacations. They didn't buy, and now they all come back out after the new year, and then they're gonna enter the market and start buying again.
Connected to that question, so what do you do if you find the deal, you close the deal, and your timeline puts you in November?
That's also a tough predicament. So we have done it two different ways. We have just kind of drug our feet a little bit, just let it sit, and not start, because if you draw zero on your loan, you pay zero interest, right? So you stop, you do nothing for a little while, or we slow play the construction. We've done that too, and that just comes into your specific circumstances and your general contractor's circumstances. We just, instead of building it quickly in 6 months, we build it slowly in 8 months, and we let it end, get it across the new year, get it finished in January. You also don't want to come in on November and be on market time and look like a stale listing, and you've got 30 or 40 days of on market time and it didn't sell for you. So now you look even worse, even when the people do come back to buy homes in January, February. So
is there a big difference in cost between subdividing versus condo? You could do principal, or you could do maybe DADUs.
yeah.
Where do you?
There's not a big cost difference between the two when I've looked at them, but the subdivision process takes a much longer time. The other issue with subdividing, and we're keeping in mind, we're mostly talking about Seattle. If you subdivide, you're going to bring the city into the equation. The condo process, I don't have to ask the city anything. The city's not involved in the condo. It's a legal process. It gets done on legal paperwork. It gets recorded with the county, and it's done. I don't have to submit it to the city. I don't have to get their comments. I don't have to have them come up with some weird thing that I've never heard about and then deal with that. So I always go to condo in the city of Seattle because it's pretty widely accepted now and it's fast. The other reason fast helps, a lot of times you're buying a property with the house on the front and you might want to refinance that front property and then get construction loans for the back, ADU, DADU, whatever you're doing in the back. Well, you can't do that until you have separate parcels or separate legal lot descriptions. If you're doing a true subdivision, you can't refinance that front house until that's done. So if that takes you 7-8 months to get through the city's process, you're waiting that 7-8 months before you can refinance that front or even talk about a lender for construction financing on the back. If I condo it, I could condo that thing within a month and a half, maybe 2 months, depending on how things go. I can condo that front house off right away, get it refinanced, and then I can move on to my financing for the back property.
So would you condo principals? Would you do multiple principal houses?
Yes, that's the only way that you're going to be able to divide them up, unless those are the only two options. I'm gonna do in Seattle, you have the unit lot subdivision also. I'm not going to dive down the wormhole, but unit lot subdivision, or you might hear the term ULS, it's essentially a subdivision process. So you either have the ULS in Seattle or you have the condo. The condo's faster, it's approximately the same price, it's still widely accepted, it still gets you what you need for lending and all of that. So the condo process generally is what we go with. We haven't done a unit lot subdivision for probably 3 years.
Do you have the knowledge of the subdivision or condo policy in the city of Bellevue?
Well, the condo process is pretty much universal for the state. So the condo process that we do with our Seattle project would be the same that you do in Bellevue. Attorney will be able to also help you with any specific Bellevue related maybe nuances. But essentially you're going to work with an attorney, do the paperwork and the condo map, and you record it with the county. King County is the same for City of Seattle. It's also the same for Bellevue. So you're going to record that condo. Once it's recorded, then you have legal lots that you could take to a lender for lending purposes.
We are looking at getting the DADUs, and so ignorance, but we are looking at starting with one or possibly two. And so future-proofing any of the utilities that we bring to site. And when we go into invest for permits, if we are able to bring utilities for both locations or for both DADUs, is there a time limit on that permit, or is it I can bring both sets of utilities, do one, and then roll into the other.
The one that's probably going to be, well, there's a couple that are going to be tough. Sewer is probably the simplest. In the city of Seattle, you can do up to 8 units on a single 6-inch sewer. So once that's on site, you pretty much can just add your whatever units you need to. That's pretty simple. The power is going to be a little bit more difficult because it's going to get designed once for your first project, and then you're essentially going to have to design it again for a second one, unless you want to go ahead and pay and get maybe a second meter installed for a possible future one. But you do need to know very specifically what the loads are going to be for that other unit. They ask you what the load calculation is so they can size their service accordingly. The drainage, the storm drainage is probably the biggest one that's coming to mind. Your drainage design is based on the actual plan. So you would really, I don't think there's a way to do the storm design without having the second ADU or DADU in the plan and be able to design that storm system to handle that. So
then the second follow-up question is, if we get design for both of them, only go through on one of them, how long do those designs last with the same?
Well, you would get a permit, and your permit would cover both, and your permit generally, I believe it's still 18 months. And then once that 18 months comes due, you generally can get an extension, especially if you're building one of the units already. It's much easier to get an extension when the project is under construction. What they don't want is permitted projects that just sit and never get built. But I have seen projects even not get started and get 2 extensions before. So it's not cut and dry. I would encourage you just to email the city of Seattle and ask them specifically, get something in writing. What is the duration that my permit is good for, and what is the extension process? Because the other thing in this real estate game that you kind of are taking the risk at is that jurisdictions, your government agencies, they're always reviewing their policies and their codes and everything, and it could change right in the middle of your project. So you're playing by one set of rules, and come to find out the rules changed halfway through, and that may or may not affect you, but sometimes it really can, and you're like, you would have never known because you don't know what they're going to change, but that can happen. So I hate to give specific numbers and have you rely on them without checking directly with the jurisdiction and making sure that that's what the current policy is.
So let's say I have a 6,000 square foot lot and I tear down the main house and I want to build like 5 or 6 units, let's say. Is there a difference whether I keep them under 1,200 square feet or if I do 1,400 square feet? Is there a lot of difference in like street improvement or other costs or utilities, whether I stay within the 1,200 square feet or if I go above that into the middle housing?
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, I did want to bring that up. There is one advantage that could potentially impact you. So right now, 3 or more units triggers street improvements, okay? So if you only do 2, you may not have to improve an alley, or you may not have to put in curb gutter and sidewalk across your property, all right? But maybe you have room and you want to do more units. Well, one little loophole, I could do 2 primary units, and then I could do 2 ADUs, and the ADUs don't trigger street improvements. So 2 primaries with 2 ADUs is still only 2 primaries. I didn't trigger the street improvements by doing that. So the ADUs would be limited to the 1,200 square feet, assuming they're 3 bedrooms. The 2 primaries could be whatever square footage you want, as long as you're working within the floor area ratio that you have based on the size of your lot and the multiplier. If you have 5,000 square feet to work with, and you can apply that square footage to the 2 primaries and the 1,200 and the 1,200, however you want to, within that floor area ratio calculation.
3 units total, or
Well, in that scenario, we're talking 4 units, 2 primaries and 2 ADUs or DADUs, or whatever you're gonna make, okay? So that's 4, we're gonna call that 4 houses, right? But to the city, that's only 2 primary units that count toward.
So say I think I found the perfect property to add a DADU, and I want to do really thorough feasibility, like due diligence. Who should I include at that stage? Like which experts from the team?
Yeah, great question. Back to, I already said it, number 1 is the architect. I think that's your quarterback. And a lot of architects have that whole team ready to go. They have all those relationships for you. And they can also decide which ones they even need. Sometimes you don't need the geotech, or you don't need, the steep slope, environmental critical area guy. So start with a really good architect that has some good relationships, and then they can help you decide what other consultants that you might need to bring in on that feasibility.
And do they typically do that before, say, I've got the property under contract? How does that work?
There's a lot of feasibility consultants, I'd say, that are kind of just do feasibilities that aren't architects, and they just kind of be the quarterback of even the architect, right? And I've seen people that do that, and they'll sell a feasibility. You can work with a company like that. You could get a relationship directly with the architect, kind of essentially removing that one person if you feel comfortable. Work directly with an architect that is capable and has all the team there. Some architects will sell feasibility services and some won't. Some just want to draw plans and projects and do plans, and they won't do feasibilities. And others I've found are okay, and they will do a feasibility, and there's a fee for it, right? You can do hourly fee. Some might have a package deal or something that includes this and this, or but that's, you just kind of have to figure out what architect is available and what they offer.
Is it also true that the architect is the best to start with if you're planning to go with one of the pre-approved DADU plans for your permitting? You still need to include an architect?
I would say 9 times out of 10 is still the best. You're going to need a site plan. The pre-approved plan is basically the building itself is pre-approved, but now you need to show the city how's that plan fit on your site. So you're going to need a survey. You get a surveyor to do the survey, and you need an architect or a draftsperson to draft that site plan for you and show how that pre-approved plan is going to sit on your property. All right. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for having me, and hopefully you liked the presentation.